Welcome back, Lincoln.
Welcome back, David. Where are we?
Hello. Thank you for joining us. This is Vermont Film Essentials. Welcome to the season premiere of Season 3. Very pleased to be here with my excellent co-host.
I'm stoked to be back. It was nice to have a month off to do some other stuff, but you know, every Tuesday I was like,
something's missing.
I want to be in the studio making a TV show. First off, check out our new chairs, guys.
Look at this.
Hey! Thank you to everybody who donated to our GoFundMe, namely Eric Langfield, Karen Sella, Crystal, Bradley Janap, and David's parents, Maureen and Charles Metzger. Thank you so much for helping us get these chairs. Next step is getting our names on them. So we're fancy guys. We're gonna be real fancy, as if we don't need to be fancier than the suits we got. All right, let's dive right into first film of season 3. You specifically structured this season to have thematic months. September is female-centric films. Why did you decide to do that?
I just thought that to try to come up with a theme each month. Specifically, in the month of October, we're going to be doing Halloween type films, scary films.
Movies.
And I figured, why limit it to just 1 month? Let's try to do that as often as we can.
Yeah.
And like if there's a month that has a specific holiday to it, let's gear it towards that.
Totally.
And something about fall and the films that we picked this month just lends itself to being a little more feminine conscious.
Yeah. We got some great guests coming up this season as well. My wife is one of them. Devin Ewalt, we just secured him. He's going to be coming back in October as well. And my buddy Rob Walker from Colorado, who's an animator and a filmmaker. He's going to be on in November with us. So we got a great season. Super excited. Let's talk about All That Heaven Allows. I had never heard of this movie before, let alone seen it. The Criterion Collection is, as with all Criterion Collection, is just friggin' gorgeous. Like, you put it in, and I was like, oh, okay, let's go. I'm ready to watch this. And the essays that are in there as well. Most of the films that you have picked for us to cover, on face value, they're good or great. Some of them I like less than others. But this one, you put it in, you watch it, and you probably have one opinion about it. Right. But then you look at all of the research and the analysis, and you learn a little bit more about Sirk, and you learn all of these things, and you're like, this film is immensely important. And it wasn't even recognized as that until well after it was released, and people kind of wrote it off as like, oh, it's just melodrama, and then they watch it again, and they're like, there's a lot going on in this movie. Let's just get right into it. It's Jane Wyman is a widow. She has college-age children. She lives in suburban New England, made-up town of Stoningham, I believe.
Yes.
Which is just the Paramount backlot. Fun fact, the house down the street from hers was the Leave It to Beaver house later in the future. How about that? Her husband has passed away. She's got older children, so she lives alone, and all of her will-to-do country club friends are constantly trying to hook her up with this widower or that guy, or you need some companionship. You can't be alone all the time. Or worst comes to worst, get yourself a television set. It's like having company. Right. I'm just like, oh, 50s. And then she meets again, I guess, her landscaper, who is the son of the man who ran the company, and he's now taken over, and they kind of hit it off in an interesting way.
Just happens to look like Rock Hudson.
Yeah, just happens to be one of the most handsome men in Hollywood in the 50s. And they hit it off, and there's quite an age gap between them. She's supposed to be 40s, early 50s. Yep. He's late 20s, early 30s, when in reality they were only 8 years apart, which is kind of like the Sean Connery, Harrison Ford father-son dynamic in Last Crusade, where you're like, oh yeah, he's way older. Wait, how old? Oh, I guess he isn't. And it's great for a while, but then her friends start getting kind of uppity about it and kind of share their opinions too much, and then her children also do the same thing, to the point where she can't really take it anymore. And she's like, I'm sorry, this isn't working. We have to call it off. And he does what any sensible person would do, which is like, all right, but you're not doing this for you. You're doing it for them. And that's dumb. But if you want to go, bye.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the crux of what happens with Jane Wyman's character. And it's all too familiar, and it's painful to watch and sad. And we have a somewhat happy ending, question mark. But it just kind of tackles a lot of important subjects that nobody was really doing, particularly not in melodrama at that time.
Right.
Why did you decide to add this to the docket?
So first, I myself too had never heard of it before. So first year of college. So one of the classes that it was a necessary class for film was American genres, and there was genres 1, 2, and 3. Each year you take one. So the first year was American Genres 1, and it was focused on westerns, melodramas, and comedies. And we get to the melodramas, and he shows us first, he's like, okay, so this is melodrama, and we're going to talk about Douglas Sirk, because he's the king of melodramas in the 50s.
Right.
So we first start off with Written on the Wind, and that is the film that he made just after this film. And we're watching it, and like everyone in the class and myself were just like, this is way over the top. Mm-hmm. This is cheesy. I can't relate to this at all. Mm-hmm.
Melodrama's tough.
It is tough. And then he shows us all that heaven allows. And, like you start off and you're like, okay, I wonder what this is going to be like. And it starts off and you're like, I don't know, this is going to be the same thing. And then all of a sudden, you're just in it, yeah. And you're like, this is good. I like this. Mm-hmm. Like I can identify with this. And I love, like I was just getting caught up in all of the lighting and the camera angles and the movements and everything.
And the mirrors.
Oh, the mirrors. And then I started to appreciate Douglas Sirk and started to pay attention to this section of the film class, like with everything, he also made a film called Magnificent Obsession, and that was the first one that he made before this, before All That Heaven Allows, also with Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson. And that film is like, everyone always says that Douglas Sirk started what soap operas are right now, that started with 50s melodrama, and you can just draw the line.
Yep.
And with Magnificent Obsession, you watch it and you're like, I get it, because all of the crazy plot twists and everything is just like, that is so a soap opera. But this never felt that way to me.
No.
And
for this to be classified as melodrama to me is almost a misnomer, because I'm like, but it doesn't feel like melodrama. I've done melodrama. I did melodrama in college, and it was more like Victorian era melodrama. Right. But it was, feigning spells and all kinds of twists and turns and devious characters and all that kind of stuff. This just felt like a drama. Right.
And it's so rooted in emotional truth. Like anyone can identify with how Jane Wyman's character feels at any given point. Yeah. And her performance in particular, like I love Jane Wyman, and her performance in particular is what, it's what anchors this whole film, and it is how you follow this film. Rock Hudson is great, he's just Rock Hudson though. But Jane Wyman is the one that you're following throughout the whole story. It's her story. Yeah. And she just does a great job of, exactly what she's feeling at any given moment. And that is also a testament to Sirk's direction in terms of, how is he lighting each scene? What is the camera movement that he is doing? And you just get so wrapped up in it. And anyone who says that this is a soap opera or that this is over the top melodrama, you can't really argue against it. It is a soap opera. It is over the top, expressive melodrama.
But it's good.
But it works. It works so good. And there's a reason for that. And just as I think there is a reason why Written on the Wind didn't hit me the same way that this film did.
Right.
The other, this came on, so I saw it, loved it, and then sort of kind of forgot about it. I mean, it was always on my mind, but it was like, it's there, I'm not going to watch it again. And then years later, it's on TCM, start watching it, Robin's there, and then we have to go somewhere, so we can't finish it. And then on the drive, Robin's like, do you have that movie? I'm like, no, but I can get it. It's on Criterion, and I will eat up every excuse to buy a Criterion film.
Wait, wife, you'd like me to buy another Blu-ray?
Done.
Okay.
And she's just like,
twist my arm.
I liked that. Like, I could really get into it. Like, I felt for her character.
I really wanted to watch this with Rachel, but our schedules didn't ever jive for it. And she, having never heard of it, was like, I'll take it or leave it. But I really think that she would enjoy it as well.
Yeah.
For every aspect of it. I mean, from the first scene, it's gorgeous. So gorgeous. Like, this is one of the best uses of Technicolor since Sergio Leone.
Absolutely.
On this show. I mean,
Absolutely.
my breadth of film knowledge is not that wide, so I'm basing it on the films that we've watched. This is gorgeous coloring. Every piece of it, the costumes, the makeup, the set dressings, his use of mirrors, like we already talked about, and just the way that this entire film looks is incredible. That's job one. It's directed unbelievably well. The camera work is so solid. The acting is so good. It's ridiculous that this film exists with so little notoriety, at least to me.
And Sirk in general, I mean, there's kind of a little bit of a resurgence and a renaissance in terms of appreciating his work right now, but it's always been funny to me that he is not regarded like the way most directors today, look back at a Hitchcock, a John Ford, a Howard Hawks. I think Sirk has just as much claim to take that spot as well, because he is so in charge of the camera and how he uses it and how he directs lighting.
I have so much respect for him and Bergman, who did Seven Seal, these guys who emigrate to the U.S., work a couple years, handful of years, decade or so, and then they just stop. They're like, I'm done. I'm going to go do something else. We just have that mindset here that you work until you're dead, especially in the arts and as a creative person. I mean, you see these actors that are in their 90s and they're still working, and it's like, okay, if that's out of passion, sure. But if you're just like, I gotta keep doing it, I got the itch for it.
Right.
He and his wife moved to Switzerland, and he just stopped directing altogether. Not even like Bergman, who's like, I'm gonna do some TV or some theater and just kind of change it up. He just stopped. It's like, there, done, told my stories. It'll be neutral with the chocolate and the ice cream and the skiing and everything. And I was talking with Devin about it, and he said that he was one of his favorite directors, and I was like, I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
Who is he? And reading the essays that are in here and reading up a little bit on Wikipedia and stuff, the guy came to the US, got into the studio system, was like, this sucks. All these scripts are terrible. He thought this script was rather impossible, was able to rework it. And he also said that the studio put such constraints on him to make these family films and to do all of these things, but they didn't constrain his directing or his editing. So that's how he was able to actually tell the stories that he wanted to do. And he's like, all right, fine, give me this garbage script and I will make All That Heaven Allows. Based on a novel, I believe. I can't even imagine what the first script was like that he hated it so much. Because this is pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not like super twists or turns or anything. It's just a human story about a woman's journey to figure out what she actually wants in her life.
Right. And I think a lot of what connects and a lot of what makes this film so potent is that social commentary that's underneath it. And the fact that it still in some form or another happens today, where you have your group of friends that are so tight knit and that are a part of a certain group of society.
Yep.
That will snicker and raise their nose at anything that happens outside of that,
Yep.
or that is trying to transgress against that. And that is what, like, you know, you mentioned before, like that the homosexual community really embraced this film and took it as one of their own. And you can see why they would do that, because this is a person that is forced to deny her happiness just so that she can get good face in the crowd.
Yeah.
And
changing everything about who you are because other people are dictating that to you. And then obviously the feminist perspective behind it as well, of forcing this woman to do what she doesn't want to do because society is telling her to, and then being like, no, go be with him, go be with the one that you want to be with, do what you want to do. Don't just get a television and sit at home and wither away and die like everybody else does, because that's the status quo. Don't do that. Do what you want to do.
And in a certain respects, that kind of that battling theme of nature, represented by Rock Hudson and his trees, silver-tips, Bruce, and Jane Wyman in the society, the civilization, and that the nature is the freedom that she could have. Yeah. And that the looking at society as a restricted, tight-knit group. And I know that obviously comes from the fact that he was a European that immigrated into America, and somehow there's...
Not even just a European, he was a German who came during the war and got out of Germany. So that's, you know, that many more layers on top of everything else that he's doing.
They know what it is to be confined and be forced into, you know, social norms.
Especially because he actually started getting most of his work after a lot of the Jewish filmmakers left because of the Nazis. So he was like, well, I guess there's work to get. So he did some work, and then at that time, Germany was very much, you know, state-controlled media, a lot of propaganda. So I'm sure he was like, let's get out of this quick. And then he comes to the States and has a different kind of oppression within the studio system. And he's just like, ooh, that's it. I'm going to Switzerland. I'm done. But not before making some great films.
And I'm sure, like, you know, I wonder if within the studio system, because this is something that, you know, it made money and it attracted an audience, and audiences loved it, and the critics said, you know, oh, it's just a melodrama. And I wonder if the studio system at that time, if they just looked at it and they saw, you know, hey, look at its nice colors, and they didn't see how subversive his story really was.
Because I'm sure when they watched it, they were just like, yeah, this looks good, cool, great. And he's sitting there going, you're not even paying attention. You're not, did anybody catch the themes?
I snuck this by you, and I don't know how I did it, but I did it, so great.
I think at this point, he was just like blatantly putting it in there and being like, anybody? Anybody see it? No? Cool.
Good.
Well, there you go.
And the other thing in terms of, you know, as a filmmaker, when you're telling stories, understanding and discovering that the camera is a tool to connect the audience to a character or a feeling or a mood, or just how you connect an audience to a story and lead them through it. You know, it was so important to me, because I guess it was just intuition when I was making, you know, the shorts in college, and then made that first feature where it was just like, oh, you know, the camera just goes here because, you know, that's where I am and it's convenient and it's great. But then when I made American Vinyl, and then when I made Northland, it was like, no, each scene, each setup, what is the reason why I'm putting the camera in this position? What is the reason why I'm using this color gel on the light, or not using a gel at all? Right. And a film like this that does that so well and charts its story through its lighting and camera positions and camera movement, it's everything to me, because it is one in a long list of films that taught me that is what filmmaking is just knowing what camera angle to use and why.
Yeah.
And being able to, when you're talking to your crew or your actors, is saying like, the camera's going to be here and this is why the camera is here, or if that question ever comes up, it's like, can we move the camera to another position so that we can do that? Well, no, we can't do that because this is the feeling that I'm trying to go for, and this is how we're going to get that.
Right. They talk quite a bit in the materials in the Blu-ray about the camera work and the cinematography. Specifically, the scene where Carrie's son is making the cocktails, and she makes it for Harvey the first time. And they're all like, oh, this cocktail's great. And everybody's having a good time, and it's fun. It's like, look, Mom's got a date. This is good. This is great. But then as soon as Rock Hudson's character comes over,
Right.
it's the exact same setup. It's the same shot as before. But the kids now are so aggressive and on the defensive and ready to hate this guy. But it's the same shot. So it's almost like our perspective is Carrie's, where it's like, okay, we're going to do this again. But the tone is so different. And he doesn't do it through the camera. The camera is just observing. And also, I read that they pointed out that there aren't a lot of close-ups. It's a lot of, if it is a shot, reverse shot, the other character is in the shot. Maybe not entirely, but if it's an over-the-shoulder, it's going to be a lot of their back and their profile in the shot as well. So he's not eliciting any kind of emotional response from you from the camera itself, but he does it through music and montage and through the performances. So it really does feel like you're observing all of this very naturally. It's not a lot of tight close-ups of like, oh no, which is what soap operas turned into. So it's so fascinating that this was kind of the benchmark for it, because it's like, you guys have gone off the rails. You could just make this, and that would be compelling daytime television. And you got all the crazy twists and turns and all that stuff, and this is just a woman falls in love with a guy who happens to be younger than her. Her social group around her tries to shun her for it. She gives into that and then realizes that that's a mistake and then goes back to him. And the original ending of the film, spoilers, was that he dies when he falls down that cliff, which makes complete sense. Within everything that we've seen in this story and everything that's going on, he really should die, because that's like the ultimate ending for this story, is that she has to be alone because she shunned love. Or she allowed society to pressure her to shun that love.
What's crazy is that I had forgotten what the real ending was.
Oh yeah?
So that when I'm watching it the second time with Robin and he falls, I'm like, oh shit, he does die. Oh my gosh, I forgot that this just has an awful ending. But then,
oh wait, he's
okay. You get a little bit of hope.
I mean,
he's
okay.
he's sort of he's bedridden, but I'm sure he'll be up and around in no time.
He's got a good constitution, this one.
But that is like, so quick story. So when Titanic first came out, I was in high school. Okay, so I see Titanic. And I think that I'm supposed to go, whatever. It's not that good.
Chick flick, man.
But inside I'm like, oh, this is so good. And there was an interview that I saw between a couple of critics on Charlie Rose, and they were talking about Titanic. And the one critic was kind of sneering at it and saying, it's over the top and it's melodramatic. It's basically a soap opera on this big ship. And the New York Times critic, Janet Maslin, is like, I don't care if it's a soap opera. He knows exactly what type of soap opera works and employs it. And that is like with this, it's like, those kids, I hate them so much.
They're the worst.
The worst kids.
I have on my notes right here, these people are awful.
Terrible.
All of them. Every single person who speaks to Carrie in this movie, I just want to slap him in the face and say, shut up.
And when
none of your business.
Whenever they give her that TV, and the camera just zooms in on.
You see her reflection in there, and you just, oh.
And she's trapped in that TV.
This is your life now, Mom. Sit at home and watch TV. These will be your friends. You don't need this young buck who loves you. Just stay at home, home.
And then later on, it's like, but you told me that I should, and he's like, oh, why would you listen to me? I was so young and stupid. I didn't know. I hate you.
And
yeah,
the scene where she calls him and says, oh, I broke up with him. And he's like, oh, that's great. Gotta run.
Right.
This is a huge emotional moment for your mother. She just broke up with the first person she's loved since your father died. But you gotta run. Ugh. And then the daughter. I love the daughter because you think that she's this higher thinking, feminist ideal, like women can do whatever they want. And then as soon as it comes down to her mom's dating a guy who's a little bit older than her, she just reverts right back to everything else that society around them is saying. And she's like, Mother, you can't do that. What a scandal. People teased me. Oh no. Bummer for you. Because someone teased you, you then think your mom can't love somebody?
Stupid kids.
Kids. Rude.
Lighting.
Yeah, man. The lighting in this film. You know you're watching something great when you want to watch it again to watch the technical aspects of it.
Yeah.
You're like, that was really good. I need to watch it again. And then when you watch it that time, you go, okay, now I need to watch it for this.
Right.
And this is one of those movies.
Because the specific scenes, it's like, why, you watch it and you're like, why is it blue? Why did he use blue light? And what does it mean? And there's scenes where it's purple light, there's scenes where it's yellow light, there's orange, there's the natural glow of his cabin that he's trying to refinish. And,
Also, how great is that middle?
Oh, God.
I'll move there.
Right?
Sign me up. The fireplace. The staircase.
It's somewhere around here. We can find one.
All right, we're done. We got to go find a cabin.
But yeah, it's beautiful. And the Walden and the poetry. It just sucks you up in this aura. But no, I mean the lighting and specifically why he is using each color. Each color is highlighting an emotion. And it's interesting to go through the film and kind of chart that and say, here's this light here. What is this emotion that is represented? What is the mood that it's giving me? It's just, that a filmmaker like Scorsese or even Tarantino, I know Tarantino has said that he's like, I have a guilty pleasure and it is Douglas Sirk. I love.
He's mentioned by name.
Right.
In the reading material.
And, he says that, he loves it, but he recognizes that this type of melodrama doesn't work today. But that you can still watch his films and you can still get wrapped up in them and they still work on an emotional level. Yep. Even if some of the acting or some of the plot points don't necessarily hold up today, or that you can kind of be like, that's kind of over the top. But
there aren't any really moments like that in this.
In this film, specifically. I mean, seeing his other films like Imitation of Life or Magnificent Obsession, you do get that this is, this is melodrama. But with this, it's just, like I said, it's so rooted in an emotional truth, and because it has that social commentary that is in his other films, but not to the extent of this film. I do think there's just such a connectivity to this film that continues to work. Yeah. So much so that Todd Haynes loved it so much and loved that style so much that he made his version called Far From Heaven with Julianne Moore, and it was basically the same type of story, but he took it even further, and so he had the Jane Wyman type character played by Julianne Moore, falling in love with the gardener who is African American, and then also her husband played by Dennis Quaid, falling in love with another man. Oh. So he kind of opened it up and said, let's put all all these modern things that they couldn't talk about at the time. Let's put that in there, and it'll look and feel like a Douglas Sirk melodrama. And it's very interesting.
Todd Haynes directed the HBO miniseries Mildred Pierce, in which my wife had a featured extra role as a waitress, and she said Kate Winslet is incredible to watch perform, and I don't deny it. And she also buddied up with Melissa Leo, which is kind of dope.
Really?
Yeah.
She never told me that.
She should. I keep telling her she needs to talk about herself more. This obviously opened the door for the modern chick flick. And I think first of movies like, even though I haven't seen it, but I know the story of it, How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Under the Tuscan Sun. It's complicated to a degree. Just these stories about women who are trying to figure their lives out in their later years. I mean, she's not even that old, but in the 50s, she's an old maid at this point. And those films, I feel like, don't get the credit that's due to them because they don't tackle it with the same amount of gravitas.
Yeah.
They don't present the negative of what's happening as a negative. They almost present it as the norm of like, why are you going against the grain? This is weird. We're the sane ones, you're the crazy one. Whereas this one presents it as, whoa, everybody back off. Right. Why is everybody up in her business about this?
Well, and also showing the nasty underbelly of society. And I think with those films, there's one aspect of it where, and I ran into this in college and was almost going to write my degree project on this, but that I loved films that were more sensitive and were quote unquote chick flicks. Yeah. Something like Terms of Endearment or even Broadcast News, and things like Jerry Maguire, As Good as It Gets. And the route I was going to take was that it's a very in the misogynistic place that Hollywood was in at the time. To call a film a chick flick was to put it down.
Absolutely.
And how is that? What about it being a chick flick is so abhorrent to men? And with this film, I think what this film has, like you were alluding to, that the other films don't have, is that there was always, it became harder for romantic comedies or romantic films to find a area of conflict.
Right.
Okay? Because it felt like the social norms that they were going through aren't really held up right now.
Right.
So then, what is keeping them apart? But I think that was a disservice to films because they just didn't. I think they just weren't trying hard enough to find an area of conflict. Right. Because all these social things that they are going through right now still exist.
Oh yeah.
You just have to find what they are and use that in your film and in your story.
And if they don't directly exist, they are representative of something that does.
Right.
With the LGBT community embracing this film, with feminism embracing this film. It's not a gay movie or a feminist movie. But you can find those themes, and you can find those currents in there, and you can say, "Oh, wow, yes, that is what we're dealing with in those circles."
And that's starting to break free. You have a film like I think it was 2 years ago now with Blue Is the Warmest Color. That is a film about two lesbians that find each other and are going through a relationship where they're not sure if they can stay together or not. And there's films along the way. I mean, I think what this film did was, there's a way you can look at it and say, what if Douglas Sirk was gay? And this was the only way that he could get what that feeling is into a Hollywood film at the time, is doing it more conventionally.
Yeah.
And I think later on, throughout all the films that came out that were quote unquote chick flicks that harkened back to this melodrama, that they weren't being clever enough to if they couldn't make their film about whatever,
Right.
how would they disguise it?
Right.
You know?
They're not good enough at the metaphor.
Right.
Or the, tongue-in-cheek aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
While this is about a woman dealing with, a forbidden love, it's more about dealing with society and everybody's interpretation of how you should live, more so than even, the through line of the film is just influenced by everything. This isn't just an A to B to C.
Mm-hmm.
It's so many other things. And I think another issue with chick flicks is that they don't pass the Bachelor test. This isn't a woman sitting around talking about a man. This is a woman pretty much sitting around talking about everybody talking about her. She spends most of the movie talking about how other people think about her, more so than even just Ron, which I realized his name is Ron, not Rob, and I've been saying it wrong the whole show. Oops. Never been good with character names. I don't know why. But I grabbed this because I wanted to find we talked about the mirrors and his use of mirrors in this. And this is something that I didn't even notice, but as soon as I read it, I was like, oh, this is the level of filmmaking that I want to get to someday, where somebody looks at it and they go, oh, this means this. And I go, yes, it does. Good for you.
Even if it doesn't.
You actually snuck one of those in for me in what Ken did. So thank you, the God camera. So this is talking about the mirrors and his use thereof. So we see, in a beautifully composed shot, the children first appear reflected in the mirror, coming between Carrie and the vase, and then as the camera pulls away, she is taken back into the room and towards the children. This one shot tells the story of the dilemma that Carrie will face for the rest of the film and is typical of Sirk's emblematic economical use of cinema.
And you read something like that, once your eyes are open to, because when you first watch that, you don't think of that.
You think, oh, he's using a mirror, neat.
Right, cool. And the camera's moving and it's gliding with them, awesome. But then someone opens your eyes and says, no, look at the way the staging of this is representative of what their relationship is and the conflict they're going to have throughout the whole film. And you're like, oh my God. And he knew that.
Yeah.
He's like, this is why I'm having them come this way. This is why the staging is that way. This is why the camera's going to move like this, and reveal them in the mirror, and then boom, find them. And you're like, okay, that's what it is to be a director, and that's what you have to do. That's how you have to think about each scene. Even if the audience is not going to get it on the first run, it doesn't matter. That's why you're telling a story. This is how you need to tell the story the best way possible in order to communicate that. And sometimes it happens on a subconscious level.
Exactly. I was just going to say that when you talk about the way that, especially the films that we're watching, are staged, I immediately think of theater staging, and the aspects of that I've learned as far as like characters' relationships to each other within the space, what's between them, what obstacles are there. And you kind of forget about that in film because it's two-dimensional and you can't really see that. But you have two characters on opposite sides of the room. There's something in between them. That's intentional. You have characters walking into the room. There's something in between them. And then they meet up. That's intentional. They're reflected in a mirror. We're only seeing what the director wants us to see. It's all intentional. And the fact that it's subtle is so great because I feel like modern filmmakers and Hollywood, for the most part, don't trust the audience. They don't trust that the audience will get it if you do something like that. But then you look at somebody like an Edgar Wright or Scorsese or any number of Richard Linklater, these guys who are just like, you know what, I'm going to make a film. I'm going to make a good film, and if you like it, cool. And if you don't, that sucks. But they compose their shots. They put the characters in positions where you don't think about it in the moment, but then when you're driving home, you go, but this, and then they went, and then what? Whoa! And then the scene takes a whole new meaning to you, and like everything after that is influenced by what you didn't even realize that you saw.
Right.
And you were doing such a great job of picking films that are thinkers. you put them in, you watch them, you go, all right. And then the next day you go, but then, and then you just have all of these epiphanies after the fact. And that is this movie in a nutshell. It's like, it's a beautiful film, and then you just keep thinking about it. I mean, look at this picture. Look at this picture. It tells you so much. And that was the first thing, I opened the box and I went, oh, damn. All right. We're going to get into a great movie here.
Love that.
And yeah.
And the deer. The deer.
The deer. They had a deer. I want a deer.
You almost see the Wrangler off the side.
Come here.
Yeah, what you were talking about just recently, and so I could give your podcast some props. So because I saw Wonder Woman late, I couldn't listen to the podcast that you guys and Rachel did.
Available now on iTunes.
But so I watched it and then listened to it, and then you guys are talking about how they didn't make a big deal of showing off her as a sexual icon, right? And you guys were talking about the scene when she goes out into no man's land, and I watched that scene. I loved it, but not until you guys were talking about it was I was like, oh, duh, no man's land. And this is a woman standing up and going out into that.
Yep.
And that is what that scene is about. And it's exactly the same thing of just like, you watch a scene and you get it, and then sometimes it happens on a subconscious level that you, all of a sudden your eyes are open to it and you're like, oh my God, there's so much going on in all of these frames.
Yeah. And it's always great when a director allows you to come to those on your own. And it is in a situation like that where they're like, but that's no man's land. And she goes, I am no man. And then stands up and you're like, well, you ruined it. I'm so glad that they didn't do that. And we talk about that in the episode. I'm so glad that Patty Jenkins had the sense to be like, this is going to mean something. Let's let it mean something. Instead of telling the audience what it means. Let it actually have some meat to it. And Sirk does that in this film. The way that she challenges her friends and the way that she challenges her children ultimately. And the scene in the butcher shop when she's talking to that woman who's just the gossip. And I wanted to be an extra in that scene and just be like, burn! Ooh. And you've had moments like that in your life when you're just around somebody that you despise, but you have to put on the face and you have to be professional, and you have the little comments to each other that
it just happened.
The words are nice,
right,
but the intention is, I would like you to get hit by a bus. There's so many great things to say about this film. We could go on and on and on, but any negative takeaways from this? Is there anything that you watch and you go, I don't know if that works anymore?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those things where I never watched this film, even when I was in college, even after watching Written on the Wind and having that negative reaction to that film. Even as I started watching this one, I never had the reaction of, this is too syrupy, this is too over the top. Never had that reaction. Although, I mean, that's the only thing that I could see someone watching it and being like, like, this is...
And I can't see anybody being that way. And if they are, I'm sorry, you're an idiot.
Definitely, like, there may be a point, you may think that at first, but there will be a point in this film, if you stick with it, if you don't shut it off immediately, if you can get past that, then there will be a point in this film where you do feel for the characters, and that you are going to get sucked into the story. And that is the beauty of this film.
I just remembered a moment that just hit you right in the feels. She's going to buy a Christmas tree because her children are coming home for Christmas. And
he's there
with a younger woman. And it's just like, could have been you. And yes, she's a younger woman, but it's presented in such a way that it's like he's with someone else.
Right.
It's not like she looks just like you, but she's 20 years younger or anything like that. It's just if you moved on, he tried to move on. And it's not to say that they're, madly in love with each other or they're married by now. It's just he's dating somebody else.
Well, and don't you find out later that that's not the case? That she saw that and just assumed that they were together, but it turns out that he was just there because, that was the friend of the family.
Yeah.
I think I may be remembering that wrong, but yeah, and it's scenes like that, like you understand exactly what is going on, and it's not anything that is, she doesn't see it and go, oh my God, and like music swells and everything. It's just, she's just,
she's affected
she sees it. She's affected by it. You get exactly how she feels,
and she's such a good actress that all of those things that happen in melodrama, the swooning and the screaming and the running away, are in a look. When she sees it and she realizes what it is, and then, oh, nice to meet you. I'm gonna go now. I did have trepidations with Ron's character about around the party that they go to, where he has to restrain the guy who's basically assaulting her. I mean, he's assaulting her. And then they leave. That I was concerned, knowing movies and knowing how these kind of movies go, that at some point there was going to be a twist and everybody was going to be right and he was going to be a jerk and he was going to be after her money or something like that. And I was so pleased that that didn't happen. And I think at the time that probably wasn't crossing anybody's mind. It might have been. That they might have had that kind of, nihilistic approach of like, well, he's clearly after something that the other characters in the film did. But I'm so glad that that didn't come true, because that would have just ruined everything.
Right.
That would have ruined the movie if that had been the case, because then her friends would have been right, her kids would have been right, and that feels like something of like a Kate Hudson, Matthew McConaughey rom-com where, oh, he's going to hurt you, and then he does and has to redeem himself.
Right.
We just cut that chunk out where he's actually just a good guy. You make the mistake of doubting him, and then you have the redeeming moment.
Yeah.
Then your character has growth. And then the protagonist that we're actually following through the film has an arc. And we go, oh, okay, great. Was he perfect? No, he's a human being. He has his flaws, et cetera, but he's not a monster. And he's not set up to be a monster. He's just a dude who wants to care for you and wants to be with you. You decide not to. So he respects you, and he walks away.
Right. And she's got to be like, she knows what's right the whole time. And
she's
it has
just
to
afraid
be those,
to accept it.
Right, and it has to be that outside force that is preventing her from doing that. And it's not all of this made up, phony, like that. Like everything that they are saying, that is the over the top melodramatic stuff, right? It's
he's just after your money,
just after
mother.
your money. He's just there's no way that he could be in love with you.
Right.
Because
he's going to walk in and twirl his mustache and throw you down on the train tracks.
Right.
And that doesn't happen.
And she's got to come to terms with, like, yes, I am beautiful enough. I am a strong, good person that deserves happiness and love. And then that's when she goes, and he's up on the rise, and she doesn't see him, and then he falls.
He's buried in the snow.
Forever. No,
we fade back in, and he's okay. He's on the couch with a concussion. I enjoyed the scene with the doctor telling her, look, I'm a doctor, but I'm also your friend. You're being dumb. The reason you have headaches is because you're depressed and you have regret. So
there was because you just read what Fassbinder wrote about that. I thought you were going to say that. I'm glad you went the other way.
No, I can't read that. It's inappropriate for our audience. But it's almost Shakespearean, because the voice of reason in Shakespeare is always a clergyman. You see it in Much Ado. You see it in Comedy of Errors. You see it in Romeo and Juliet.
Yep.
And that's translatable into doctors and other professionals like that in modern cinema. Of like, I have this job to do, but I'm also just an observant person, and I think what you're doing is A, B, or C.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't want to accept it because she's only heard the opposite from people she doesn't like and people she doesn't respect. But then here's someone that she does like and she does respect, and he's saying the opposite. He's saying, no, follow your heart. Do what you want to do. Go be with, if you want to be with him, be with him. Screw them. And she's like, and that's a melodramatic moment where she's like, well, I couldn't possibly do that. That just, but my children. And he's like, they're adults. They'll get over it. If you want to be with him, be with him. And then she does. And we have a happy ending because he's not, they don't ride off into the sunset together, but they are together.
Mm-hmm.
And that, anything more than that would be the sappy melodramatic ending that we don't want to see. So he just wraps it up as perfectly as he can. He's like, and these two people can be together now,
Mm-hmm.
with all their flaws and their scars and their concussions and annoying children in tow.
And it is nice, like there's a way that you can look at that now and read that as he's saying that, you know, you are going to have to go through hell.
Yeah.
There is going to be a lot of pain. There is going to be a lot of suffering, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is hope afterwards.
Anything worth working for isn't easy. Right. So if you want this relationship to work, maybe he needs to fall off a cliff and almost die. I mean, maybe, for the sake of your romantic story. Yeah. Final thoughts?
I'm really glad you liked it.
Were you worried?
No, well, because after a couple of movies, like I feel like it could go both ways, and like I always love weighing out each one.
But what didn't I like about those two movies?
I know.
Yeah.
But again, like with this,
and
like
this guy is fantastic.
I knew you'd like it.
Yeah.
No,
Really?
What I love about this film is it is a perfect film to curl up in fall, in winter, snuggle, have yourself a hot toddy, and just get sucked up into this story, because it is like it takes you along. You feel every emotion, and he is such a strong director, and such an influential director in this respect, that he is able to find the perfect angle, the perfect movement, the perfect light to tell this story, so that you are sucked up into it. And whatever, if it's a soap opera, if it's an over-the-top melodrama, I do not care. I love it to death, and I want to keep watching it, and I want to keep revisiting it, because there's so much in here that you can identify with and can take into all the stuff that we're going through now. I mean, this still works, and this still resonates, and has an impact on people.
Definitely. And I hate that this is even like a testament, but I'm such a millennial that anything that can get me off my phone and get me to just pay attention. Like I watched this over a course of 2 days while having my breakfast before work, and I was just enthralled with it. Like my phone would go off and be like, shh, 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 shh. I'm watching Jane Wyman. And
she's a treasure.
She is a gorgeous lady and a phenomenal actress, and I do not know her work, and that is a travesty. Also, previously married to Ronald Reagan. How about that?
Did not know that.
Back before Nancy and when he was still an actor. I think this is even pre-Governor Reagan. But yeah. All right, guys, go watch this movie. You can find it on Amazon for $2. Amazon Video. Get it, or just go get this amazing Criterion collection.
It is,
You got DVD, 2-disc DVD, and a Blu-ray in here. And, you buy these for the essays and for the transfer, obviously, but go get this. And can I tell you how mad I am at myself. I missed the Blu-ray sale entirely.
Me too. And there's also some great stuff on here. There's a profile on Douglas Sirk. It's a BBC documentary. That's just fantastic. I mean, there's other supplemental features, but that in particular is crazy good and such an insight into this director.
Anything that comes out of the BBC, I'm going to watch. So, yeah, get on that. Cool. Next week, one of my favorites. Just watched it over the winter because it was on Netflix, I think. A classic, both of literature and of cinema, To Kill a Mockingbird. The great Gregory Peck. I mean, if you've not seen To Kill a Mockingbird, just go watch it because it's wonderful.
Go see it and then come watch us blubber through about it, because all I need is the first three piano hits on the score, and I'm a puddle of liquid mess throughout the whole movie. But
Rachel
I can't wait to talk about it.
Very much wants to name our daughter Scout because of this movie.
Oh. So,
and I'm like, maybe nickname. I don't know if we can get away with Scout. Only because everybody's pretty stupid these days. Sorry. But I think if we named a girl Scout, they'd be like, why's your name Scout? Because of To Kill a Mockingbird. What's that? Go away. Everyone.
if we get a second dog, I will name her Scout.
Yeah.
Because when we got Addie, I'm so glad. I love Addie. I picked the name, and it was a movie reference, and I loved that I picked it. But right after I did, I was like, oh, Scout. Damn.
Should have named her Scout. Ah.
But no, next time.
Thank you again to everybody who helped us get these bad boys.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very comfortable.
Yeah, much better, and I don't feel like I'm going to break them,
Nope.
which is a delight. We will be back next week with To Kill a Mockingbird. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, all that good stuff. We're going to be doing some fun stuff with Season 3. So until next time, I'm Lincoln L. Hayes.
I am David Metzger.
Go watch a movie like this one.